Hi, I'm the mother who watched her own son-in-law burn my husband's will, right there, at my daughter's wedding. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll die poor." And the worst part? My family just stood there silent, like I was already gone. But life's funny that way. Sometimes the ashes you're left with hide a truth worth $156 million. Now tell me, what would you do if the people you loved buried you while you were still breathing? The sky looked like it had been hand-painted just for today, soft streaks of orange melting into a calm blue. Folks filled the backyard like they'd stepped out of a magazine ad. Crisp linen suits, hats tilted just right, dresses that caught the sun and held it. There was jazz, that New Orleans kind that makes your heart feel like it's dancing even when your feet ain't moving. There was laughter, clinking glasses, folks snapping pictures. But me? I was standing there in my old Navy suit, one button loose, shoes a little scuffed, didn't care much for buying new things just to impress people who already forgot my name. They said this was supposed to be her happiest day, my daughter's wedding. But I felt like I was burying something instead, like joy had been traded for performance. Like my smile had to be rehearsed just to blend in. They had crawfish étouffée and beignets dusted in powdered sugar. Aunties humming gospel as they fanned themselves under the shade. Blessings were given in whispers. But none of that could shake the chill crawling up my spine when I looked at that man standing next to my baby girl. That groom. Too polished. Too perfect. The kind of smooth that hides cracks. I'd felt it before. Quiet things he'd said. Moments that didn't sit right. Backhand compliments. Quick glances. My daughter used to look me in the eyes when she laughed. Now, she barely glanced my way at all. Her eyes moved past me like I was part of the decor, something old, kept around for tradition. I raised her better than this, I whispered under my breath. So why's she looking at me like I'm the one who owes her an apology? Something in the air shifted when I walked by the drinks table. I heard his voice low, careless. "Don't worry. Old man's not in the way." I paused. Didn't even have to turn around to know it was him talking. And his brother, or maybe one of his boys, laughed in that slick, sharp way folks do when they think they untouchable. I stepped back into the circle. Music still playing, but every beat felt off rhythm. I took my seat, kept my hands folded, waited. When it came time for the toasts, he strutted up like he was born with a mic in his hand, smiled too wide. That smile, it was all teeth, no soul. "If my father-in-law could give one more thing," he said, raising his glass, "I hope it's learning how to stay out of our business." The crowd burst. Some laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd ever heard. Others, well, the old folks, looked around like someone had just slapped the preacher. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Not because I wanted to. Because that's what you do when your daughter's looking. You smile so she don't see you break. You smile so you ain't the story. There's a kind of silence that hits you louder than a scream. And in that moment, I heard everything, every warning I'd ever ignored about that man. I heard my own heart cracking like dry wood. After a while, I slipped inside the house, needed a breath, needed peace. I made my way to the study, my room. Still had my books, my chair, a place where the world used to make sense. But when I opened the door, he was already there. He stood by the desk, holding the envelope. My will. My handwritten, notarized, been through hell to write it will. "Don't look so shocked," he said, calm like a man folding laundry. "She won't need this. You won't either." And with that, he held it over the comm. Candle. The flame caught fast. Paper curled into smoke. I stepped forward. Too late. Ashes. That's what years of planning turned into. Just ashes. "I gave everything," I said, voice low. "And now, I ain't even got my name left on paper." He stepped close. "This ain't your family no more, old man." I looked at him, long and hard. Thought about what it meant to be erased by someone you let in. My fist tightened, veins showing through skin tired from building homes, raising kids, burying truth. Then, I let it go. Not because I was afraid, but because in that moment, he gave me something real. He showed me exactly who he was. The night had gone quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that makes you hear everything you wish you hadn't. I stepped out of the study, the smell of burnt paper still clinging to my jacket. Folks were leaving, heels clicking on the porch, laughter thinning out like smoke in the humid New Orleans air. The lights from the backyard flickered across empty plates and half-drunk glasses of champagne. It smelled like cologne, sugar, and something dying. I stood there looking through the window, watching the ashes settle in the fireplace, my will gone. Not just money on paper, but years of sweat, promises, history. I thought about walking back in there, making a scene, demanding respect the way men used to when words meant something. But my mama used to say, you can't teach respect to folks who ain't ready to listen. So I just stood there and let the night breathe around me. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 angry mouths. When a man speaks too soon, truth drowns in noise. The sliding door creaked open behind me. I didn't have to turn to know it was her, my daughter, Danielle. Her perfume was the same one her mama used to wear, sweet, stubborn, and sad all at once. "Daddy," she started, her voice soft but trembling. I turned then. Her face looked older somehow, like joy had already cost her too much. "You saw what he did," I said. "You saw him burn what was meant for you." She shook her head, eyes darting everywhere but mine. "He didn't mean it like that, Daddy. Tavon he got emotional. You know how weddings are." Her words hit like cold rain. "Emotional?" I said quietly. "That will wasn't for me. It was for you, for what's right." She pressed her lips together, hands shaking as she smoothed her dress. "You always made everything about what's right. Maybe we just wanted what's easy." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. The sentence landed harder than anything her husband could have thrown at me. Easy. That's what the world had become for them. No lessons, no honor, just shortcuts. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I just looked at her. That kind of look only a father can give the one that holds back storms. My silence must have scared her more than anger would have. She turned, eyes glistening, and walked out the door, the sound of her heels echoing through the hall like a goodbye I never agreed to. It didn't take long for the whispers to start again. Tavon called everyone back inside, said he wanted to clear the air. The house filled up with relatives, church friends, cousins, the same folks who'd smiled through the toast earlier. You could feel the shift in the air, polite tension dressed up as family concern. Tavon took center stage, his voice all charm and poison. "We just want to make sure Pops is okay," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder like we were old friends. "He's been a little forgetful lately, ain't that right?" Laughter rippled through the room light, uncomfortable, fake. A few nodded. Others looked away. In our culture, folks don't like scenes. They like saving face. And right now, mine was being painted over. I didn't speak, just looked around the room at faces I'd fed, helped, prayed for. None of them met my eyes. It wasn't a meeting, it was a setup. A stage made to make me look like an old fool too proud to know when to sit down. Sometimes the smartest man in the room says nothing because he's listening. I watched the lies pile up neat as bricks. I'd use them later. Every single one. When it ended, I walked out. Didn't slam no door, didn't raise no voice. Just stepped into the night. The air was thick and heavy, streetlights flickering off puddles on the sidewalk. I walked slow, tie loosened, shoes brushing against gravel. These kids forgot who built the house they live in and whose sweat bought their peace. At the curb, I stopped by my car, opened the trunk halfway, saw that old Marine Corps wooden box sitting there like a ghost from another life. I didn't touch it, not yet. Just looked at it long enough to remember what it meant: discipline, patience, fight. I took off my tie, folded it careful, and slipped it into my coat pocket. That small act felt like laying an old version of myself to rest. I didn't lose tonight. I just learned who was never with me. The phone in my pocket buzzed, unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something instinct maybe made me answer. "Mr. Hunter Osric?" The voice on the other end was calm, Official. This is the Pentagon. We need to discuss a matter involving your late grandfather's classified file. For a long second, I just listened to the silence on the line, the weight of that name my grandfather pressing down on every memory I had. Then I looked back at the house behind me, glowing with fake laughter and borrowed joy. And for the first time all night, I smiled. Not because I forgave them, but because life just handed me something they couldn't take. I woke before the sun, restless, the weight of betrayal pressing cold against my chest. The night had carried too many echoes. I rose and stepped onto my porch, the humid air wrapping around me like regret. I cracked open the window for coffee, the drip in the dark room louder than any accusation. In that silence, the Pentagon's voice from last night returned to me. Grandfather. Classified file. $156 million. Why now? I wondered if it was a scam or a cruel trick. But deep in my bones, a spark awakened old stories of Otis, maps, missing files, men who died in silence, never told. The ache wasn't excitement. It was something sharper. Why does truth always come dressed in loss? Leaving the house before dawn, I walked the cracked sidewalks toward the community park where I'd played as a boy. The swings hung still. The benches sagged. The hollow echo of children's laughter from long ago haunted me. I remembered Otis carving wood, showing me how to read the grain like a map to see where land divided and where memories hid. He told me things folks dismissed. Tonight, I walked that old ground in search of what he left behind. Mr. Langston was sitting on a bench, gray head bowed, watching the pale dawn. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked up as I approached. "You came out early," he said in that slow southern drawl. "Your granddaddy used to tell me, you ain't got to be loud to be heard. You just need to speak when silence gets too proud." I asked him what secrets Otis kept. He chuckled softly, then turned serious. He never trusted the banks. He trusted maps. As his words sank in, I felt cold in my hands and heat in my heart. The map, the box, the key, pieces in a puzzle no one warned me about. I hurried home, heart pounding, and went straight to the garage. I found the wooden chest I'd left there dusty, old, weighted with memory. Inside, wrapped in cloth, I found a map stained with age and a brass key stamped JMC. The map wasn't of battlefields. It traced a street in New Orleans lines, pointing to a church I'd never heard of. Jackson Memorial Church. 3 blocks from the block where Otis grew up. Reality pressed hard. My grandfather laid breadcrumb trails for someone to follow. For me, he never whispered them to my father. The map meant something. The church meant something. And Otis knew. I sat in my living room with a map, the key, and a brittle photograph. Otis in uniform beside another man whose name was scribbled out. Names in Otis's old address book were scratched. Contacts missing. Motives masked. I saw it now. My family's brokenness wasn't random. It was deliberate, built on stories half told. I breathed through it, swallowing hurt, forging clarity. I thought the fire at that wedding was the end of something, but it was only smoke. The truth was still smoldering. I locked the box, pocketed the key, and stepped to the door. Street lights still flickered in the half-light. As I walked away, a black sedan coasted by. The driver's window tint hid the face, but the eyes, inside, watched me. I'm done waiting for truth to knock. I'm going to the church. I walked home under the soft glaze of dusk, every step heavy with memory. The street had quieted neighbors, pulling shades, curtains drawn. In that fading light I felt exposed, like someone watched me through windows. I passed the church steeple at half silhouette, felt the weight of ghosts trailing me home. Inside, the living room had already filled. Kenyatta stood by the door, shoulders squared, eyes down. Tavon watched me from across the room, framed by family photos and fake smiles. The scent of red beans simmered in the kitchen. Hymns low played from the speakers. I halted in the doorway, took it in. A gathering built not to heal, but to judge. He cleared his throat and addressed the room. Family, I thank you all for coming. I've got some things to share. Footage. Accounts. Let's clear the air. He smiled. Too polished. Too prepared. My internal voice whispered, why do apologies always come with cameras? The crowd sat a patchwork of relatives, church elders, neighbors, some faces, friendly, others wary. I studied them, but said nothing. He flicked on a screen. He played a video of me at a community meeting. My voice firm, my hands steady. I was making a point advocating for better housing in our block. Then it cut to black, mid-sentence. My argument left hanging. There was quiet first, then murmurs. A cousin whispered, "Did he freeze?" Someone else snickered. Eyes darted. Some assumed technical error. Others looked skeptical. I felt that humiliation. Bitter. Hot. But I stayed seated. If I rose to defend, they'd call it rage. If I remained silent, they'd say I was broken. So I waited. Let them show their faces first. Then Tavon clicked to a slideshow, baby pictures, graduation nights, holidays, everything we once held. But my face was gone. Blank boxes, no image tags, the labels stripped clean. A niece whispered, "Daddy, why doesn't Papa show up?" In that moment, I felt wholly erased, not just from albums, but from memory. They erased me from memory before erasing me in life. My hands clenched inside my jacket. My jaw tightened. Pain sliced open the wound from last night. Voices rose soft, defenses first. He's trying to protect the family, someone said. We don't want division. Kenyatta stood, voice quiet but firm. We're only protecting our future. I was tired of futures built on lies. I stood, calm. My voice measured. I gave everything to this family. Love, time, sweat. And when some destroy your memory, that's worse than burning documents. I looked at them, full in the face. You can steal land, but you can't steal roots. Silence swallowed the room. No one applauded. No one spoke. I walked from the circle, my steps steady. Outside, the night was heavier. I heard the television inside flicker on. I paused. The screen glowed my burned will, last frame. Someone planted that. A reminder that the war wasn't over. When morning came, it felt hollow. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it didn't warm me. I walked into my study, heart tight, and froze. The metal display case empty. My war medals gone. In their place, behind glass, sat corporate awards stamped with Tavon's name. Legacy erased, replaced. He didn't steal my past. He rebranded it. I remembered Otis pinning that medal on my chest, his proud hands, his eyes shining as he said, "You carry more than medals. You carry memory." I clenched my jaw, anger steadying like bone. This wasn't theft. It was psychological warfare. He was not just taking, he was rewriting. I left the house and drove to his office. Under the guise of clearing the air, I walked into his polished lobby, heart pounding softly. I entered his office and saw it. My medal, mounted behind him. Tavon's name, etched below. He turned, eyes widening a flicker, then a smirk. "Thought you'd like to see your legacy find a better spot." The receptionist glanced at me. No one spoke. I held the silence. They don't know a legacy is built from sacrifice, not showmanship. I offered no words, no drama. Instead, I turned and left. The soft click of my shoes down the hall echoed contempt louder than any yell. Next stop, the bank. The account I'd counted on my emergency fund, money saved over decades, flagged, frozen, under investigation for fraudulent transfers. My name, once respectable, now stained by accusations I didn't see coming. I demanded answers. Who authorized this? Who signed off on my own money being locked out? The manager shrugged, eyes cold. I can't speak to that. The institution I'd trusted now turned against me. I walked out with nothing but disbelief. Betrayal is sharpest when it comes from where you least expect the system you once served. Back at home, I sat among empty boxes and soft shadows. The chest, the map, the ledger from Otis's hand. I laid them before me. I traced lines, keys, notes, links emerged. Will, destroyed. My past erased. Now finances taken. Tavon's grip was tightening. I drew a quiet breath. I resolved. I will not beg. I will dismantle him piece by piece. Start with money. Truth is the currency he can't counterfeit. I typed the letter to Justine. The phone rang. Caller ID hidden. I answered. Mr. Delmar, your bank reversed a transfer. You have 24 hours to withdraw, or your assets go into receivership. I closed my eyes. In that pause, I tasted both dread and resolve. This is more than war. It's takeover. The sun leaned west when Justine and I pulled up at the vault. My palms were cold. The air inside felt sterile walls of steel, fluorescent hum. We carried permission, signatures, names stamped on paper. Bank staff eyed us, uneasy, silent. The vault doors swung open, heavy, hollow. Echo filled the space. My heart pounded. I walked inside, Justine trailing. We found it. A sealed envelope stamped with my name, old and stamped decades ago. I held it carefully, as though holding my own heart. This is the first time in years I will see my name spelled right. I peeled the wax, slid it open, and there it was. Otis's will, written by hand, declaring me sole heir to assets and a piece of land hidden from sight. Beside it, tucked under the folds, a photo. Leander in uniform beside Otis, mud and barbed wire behind them. The inscription, for Osric, when all is lost. Leander's face was young, proud. I remembered him as an old man with stories, not the soldier beside my grandfather in war. Later, Leander would tell me, Otis entrusted that photo, that will, to him knowing danger loomed. He kept it safe so the world couldn't destroy it. I pressed the photo to my chest. A flood of loyalty, grief, surprise. Word leaked from Tavon's camp within hours. Osric rewriting history to steal from family, claiming miracles. Kenyatta texted me, why didn't Dad ever tell me this? Truth or chaos? That choice sat heavy. If I revealed now, the blow would crash. If I held back, doubt would fester. I chose restraint, but strategy. Share fragments with church elders, neighbors I trust. Let their own eyes connect the dots. Later, an injunction landed. The envelope contested, locked by court order. The bank staff resealed it. I fought the itch in my palms, the flame in my chest. They took my will. Now, they try to silence my voice. I walked out of the vault steady, not broken. This wasn't defeat. It was the prelude to a counterattack. At dusk, I found Leander in the park. He handed me an old journal, Otis's ledger, names, places, codes. I flipped pages. One name stopped me cold. Not Tavon, someone close. I looked up at the skyline, dark and promise-laden. So, the war begins not against him, but against everyone who drew the map. I drove into the crumbling block where Romello lived, just as dusk settled. The houses leaned, paint peeling, streetlights dim. I followed the directions from Otis's ledger, past empty lots and fences topped with wire. Every glance out the window felt like eyes tracking me. When I reached the address, I sat a moment, inhaling dust and quiet. Then I walked up and knocked. The door opened slowly. Romello stood there in the hallway, reluctant. He met my eyes but didn't step aside. You came, he said without warmth. I came to find truth, not trouble, I replied. But this door closes one more lie. After a moment, he nodded and invited me in. The interior smelled of old paper, boxes, filing cabinets stacked full of records. It felt like a time capsule of secrets. He led me down a narrow corridor to a back room. He unlocked a cabinet, pulled out a USB drive labeled Otis Delmar Revelations. He slid it into a computer. The recording started Tavon's voice. Cold, precise. Erase every trace, every draft of the will, every bank account, every file. If he fights, label him unstable. Make sure he can't be seen. Silence filled the room. My heart pounded. I remembered his face as a boy, laughing, trusting. He was gone. Romello watched me, his voice soft. He sang this song years ago. We just needed the player. I pressed my palms flat on the table. Every lie I'd sensed now stood in audio. Rage and relief warred inside me, but I stayed steady. When I left, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The voice on the other end, Mr. Delmar, your friend in the hospital. There's no record, no file. We can't find him. What do you mean? I asked. Sir, we've checked. No record of your arrival. I closed my eyes, swallowed. I trusted the system once. Now it betrayed me. They made me invisible. I said quietly. From paper to presence. Romello placed a hand on my shoulder. You ready for what comes next? I nodded. Tonight, lies meet light. We gathered the map, key, ledger, audio drive, plans drawn in soft light. Romello sealed the drive. I tucked it into my coat. As I stepped outside the neighborhood, rain began to fall. I moved faster. When I reached my car, I closed the door behind me. I walked up the walkway toward my house. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I turned. A black SUV idled under the streetlight. Tavon stepped out first, looking sharp and calm. Two men followed. He smiled. We've been waiting for your little concert to start. I stood straight. Hope you tuned your instruments right. He laughed quietly. The men advanced. The night held its breath. I met his eyes and said, You forgot something, son. I was built from fire. I stepped into the courthouse under gray skies, the marble entrance cold beneath my shoes. Journalists angled lenses. Church elders offered nods. Strangers watched quietly. Justine walked beside me, suit pressed, expression firm. Leander waited near the entrance, silent support. Inside, the hallways swallowed each footstep and echo camera shutters popped like distant cracks of thunder. My pulse beat steady, though my mind roared. Today, I thought, they'll either see me or silence me. I whispered my mother's prayer in my head. Truth speaks, even when tongues tremble. The prosecution opened with a barrage, accusations of delusion, instability, obsessions with inheritance that never belonged to him. Their words were sharp, rehearsed. I listened, fingers gripping the arms of the chair. I'd survived war. I could survive this. Then Justine stood, composed. She presented the secret will, Romello's recording, the foundation of evidence Tavon tried so hard to erase. In her voice was calm outrage. The room shifted. The judge leaned forward. Glances passed in the gallery, some hopeful, some doubtful. I fought to keep my face calm. When they played Dolores's recorded voice, the hush that fell hit me. She named Tavon. She confessed she knew of plots, that she tried to intervene. She spoke of betrayal, destruction of legacy. The courtroom gasped, supporters cried, faces crumpled. Tavon's eyes grew hard, jaw tight. I closed mine for a moment, feeling vindicated and hurt both. You taught me to fight in silence. Let this speak. No sooner had silence curled around her words than the prosecution introduced the next blow. A court order freezing my assets. They claimed I was trying to liquidate the estate prematurely. My breath caught in my throat. Justine rose, evidence in hand, objecting fiercely. She presented records, the will, financial audits. The judge ruled, assets frozen pending review. The hold remained, though the scrutiny started. Then the defense's turn rose. Leander stood, showed the battlefield photo, Otis and me in uniform. He spoke of loyalty, sacrifice. Romello testified next, revealing conversations, motives, Tavon's long planning. The room shifted. Kenyatta came forward last. She trembled. Did you know your husband destroyed your father's will? the judge asked. She faltered, then said, I knew something was wrong. Her words cracked open the room. I rose, voice low but firm. I never asked for glory. I only asked to be seen. My life has been built on holding promises, not stepping on them. My father left me lands, names, trust. You strip them, but you can't strip what's living in witness. Memory. The judge leaned forward, gavel raised. He paused. I heard my mother's words echo inside me. Again. Truth speaks, even when tongues tremble. He struck once and said, Court is adjourned until tomorrow for the final ruling. The gavel's hammering echoed long after everyone left. Outside, the light slanted low. I exhaled. The war wasn't over. But today, the tide had turned. The morning came slow and quiet. Light spilled across my living room floor, like a quiet promise, golden and still. I was already up, sitting near the window with a cup of coffee gone cold in my hands. I didn't even hear the first ring of the phone. It rang again. I answered. It's over, Justine said. Her voice didn't carry triumph, just calm. The court ruled in your favor. I didn't say anything, just stood there, feeling like something was supposed to lift off me, but didn't. After she hung up, I walked over to my old piano and sat down. My fingers touched the keys, but I couldn't play. Not yet. I looked up at the photos on the wall, my younger self, smiling too wide. My wife, arms wrapped around a baby Tavon. Every frame was a reminder of time, of what was stolen and what found its way back. I whispered, It's strange how justice feels heavy, not light. There was no joy in the victory. Just a quiet ache. A long breath. I hadn't realized I'd been holding all these years. Later that morning, a delivery truck pulled up to the curb. I stepped outside to meet the courier. He handed me a sealed envelope official, thick, marked confidential. My name was on it. The return address read, Department of Veterans Affairs. I brought it inside and sat at the kitchen table before opening it. Inside was a typed letter, plain but cold in its finality. My father, Otis Delmar, had been owed compensation for classified service. The amount? $156 million in unclaimed federal assets. A check was enclosed. The letter stated, I, as his only living heir, was entitled to the full amount, including the land trust in Mississippi. I sat there, not moving, the letter trembling in my hands. I blinked, laughed, the kind of laugh that breaks right down the middle. I said, You lived poor, so I could die free. It didn't feel like wealth. It felt like a truth finally allowed to breathe. My father had died a nobody in their eyes. But now, the very government that ignored him had to acknowledge his name. By mid-afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. Tavon stood there. But not the Tavon who spit arrogance and wore pride like a mask. No, this man looked broken. His clothes were neat, but his eyes were messy. Shame clung to him like smoke. I know you don't owe me a thing, he said. I didn't want to disappear in your shadow. I wanted people to know I existed. I stared at him. That same little boy who once looked up at me with wonder, now looked at me like a man looking at a mirror he cracked himself. I didn't yell, didn't scold. I walked over to the drawer and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check, not for him, but for the community fund. I handed it to him. You want to be seen? I said. Start with the people you made invisible. His lips trembled. You're not going to destroy me? I shook my head. You already did that yourself. I'm just not finishing the job. He didn't speak, just took the envelope and backed down the steps like each one was heavier than the last. That evening, I drove back to the church, the same one I stood in when everything started falling apart. This time, it was full. Leander was there. Romello, even Kenyatta. Folks who hadn't spoken in years, now seated together like they knew something holy was about to be said. I stepped up front, looked out at all those eyes. We are the stories they tried to burn, I began. But you can't bury what God intends to bloom. I don't know what came over me then, But the words weren't rehearsed. They rose up from somewhere deep and painful. I talked about truth, about survival, about what it means to outlive a lie and still choose love. Some cried, some whispered prayers. The organ played low behind me as I stepped back and sat down. Afterward, the sky turned deep with orange and purple. I sat on my porch with Leander, 2 glasses of bourbon sweating in the heat. Across the street, children played, laughter echoing like we hadn't lost anything. "We survived long enough to be believed," he said. I nodded. That's the real miracle. A car passed by slow, Marvin Gaye on the stereo, "What's Going On?" The sound faded into the dusk. "All my life, I fought to be remembered," I said. "Now I just want to rest being known." We sat quiet after that. No more speeches, no more courtrooms, just the sound of the world turning without asking for permission. As the last light left the sky, I went inside. Picked up that old photograph of the folded napkin leaf. The same one from all those years ago. I placed it inside the family Bible, right next to the letter from the Pentagon. One piece of paper said faith, the other said fact. They belong together now. "They burned the will," I said to the empty room, "but not my will to live right."